please open that up. What we are hopefully going to accomplish. We're looking at a bib today, not just a source. We looked at freehand last time. Some of you expressed to me that was helpful, which is, makes me glad. This is a student's work, and I think it's pretty good. It's a pretty good bib. It's doing a lot of what we need to do, and conveniently, I think the source is pretty good too. We can use it to try to have the kind of conversations we've had the past couple classes. Mostly what I want to do, what I want you to do as you read, look for specific arguments or ideas, okay, and or evidence. The student has some thoughts about some of the evidence, but I think we could go much more in depth with a couple of these quotations. So if you have any ideas, you want to riff on any of the information we get in this bib, that's what we're trying to do. So take a couple minutes, read over this, we're going to talk about it. Anybody need more time? Outstanding. All right, let me get a marker. All right, so generally, first, the paper this student read seems to, anyway, set up a pretty clear-cut dichotomy. All that means is, according to this author, there's like two kinds of guys in this movie, basically. What kind of guys are we talking about?
Real men and business.
Yeah. I like that. The real men, right? Oh, is my marker dying too? Right? Which is interesting. We kind of touched upon this in different ways, but they go pretty in depth with two scenes that I guess we'll talk about as well. The first one, first scene of the movie. Again, this is how we meet John McClane, and we learn some really important things about him. He's a dad, he's married, he's scared to fly, which is interesting, right? That point, because it's something our author talks about. Do you guys follow his logic? Like, what is he saying? It's not just that McClane is scared to fly. He makes an argument why that is. It's in the quotation. Well, according to this guy, what is he saying really scares McClane about flying?
The non-reliance or non-self-reliance.
Self-reliant. So the inverse of that would be real men are self-reliant. Let's test that a little bit. And by the way, all we're doing for right now, this is what this author is saying this movie is arguing. Okay? Somebody explain that to me. What is not being able to depend upon yourself have to do with being on a plane?
Like it's not really like you're the one driving the plane. Like if the pilot falls asleep and the whole plane crashes and you die.
You're just looking around like, hope this goes well. Yeah. So having to give up that self-reliance, right? It's a signal, according to the author's argument, that this is a pretty important characteristic, right? And the other way we can test that, think about McClane throughout the movie. This feels like a pretty good descriptor. For the most part, are there any places where we could poke at that theory a little bit, test it, stretch it? Is he always self-reliant, like completely 100% self-reliant?
No.
Why do you say that?
Well, he's got an out for.
He does.
Moral support.
And look, there's still support though, right? And what's interesting, he's not physically there. So in the physical sense, like now we got some momentum. We could, I get excited, I go quickly. I want to take a step back for just a second. We are not necessarily disagreeing with this person in a body paragraph we might write, right? In many ways, I think we agree, right? John McClane is super self-reliant. One of you pointed out last time it's him versus like 12 dudes or something. Add to that the deputy police chief seems to be against him. The media seems to be against him, right? Like it's just him, like versus the world, more or less, but not exactly. So some qualifiers here. He's mostly self-reliant. I kind of wonder if he's self-reliant in a physical sense, right? Because he doesn't have anybody there with him. Although there's another scene where I think we could wonder if that's necessarily true. But for 90% of the movie, we would say, this is accurate. That's a body paragraph all on its own. To think about how the film defines masculine hero figures, right? They are incredibly self-reliant. Body paragraph. However, maybe a body paragraph after that, where we think about the other 10%, because that seems important too, right? He does have Al for, let's think about some terms we could use. Moral support is one. Best way to figure this out, let's go to a scene. Let's think of a scene in the film that we would use to try to explore how McClane depends upon Al. Because first of all, it's not physical, it's via the walkie-talkie. So it's like virtual or something. They're using technology, right? Yeah.
He relies on him to pretty much give an insight on what's going on inside the building since they can't get in.
Oh, how Al relies on him. I'm saying, how does McClane rely on Al?
Well, McClane does the same thing by pretty much keeping him updated on what's going on.
He does. He'll give him a little bit of intel on like, oh, the FBI's here. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Like at the end, not at the end, but like when Clayne was basically starting to like feel hopeless and like gave that whole speech about like tell my wife I love her. I never.
We'd have to talk about the bathroom scene.
Yeah.
We'd have to.
And Al basically gave him more of a emotional support, like, well, you're gonna be the one to tell her, and that I feel like boost him back up, like. Cause
He does,
like,
and I like, so you took moral support, which it is that, but we modify it a little bit further. It's emotional support, isn't it? Like, McClane is on the verge of, I think, breaking down.
So I'm about to say, I think he's at that point, bathroom, he's kind of like at his like rock bottom, like the whole
Yeah.
movie.
He's in despair.
And Al like picks him up and like, hey, you're good, bro. You're gonna make it.
Yeah, and we don't have time to go find the scene, so we're going to have to drum this up in our memory, but you would want to go watch the scene, right? If you're thinking about, you go watch that scene, take you 2 minutes, But he says something like, I've seen the movie a lot. He says, hey, I love you. All the guys down here love you. That's an interesting way to open. I love you? a man telling another man in the bathroom that he loves him. I mean, that's weird. That's notable.
I just don't.
Yeah, especially I feel like in the bathroom, you know. So that's worth thinking about. The context of what McLean says, like, tell my wife I'm sorry, I never apologized. That's probably worth thinking about. And then Al says you'll tell her yourself. You're gonna make it. You know, we're pulling for you. That's the I love you lines. It's like we're all pulling for you. We got a pool going, which is a very, we talked about this a little bit, maybe 2 classes ago. There's a lot of man language in the movie. So it's funny to me that he tries to end the conversation with, oh yeah, we're betting on whether or not you're going to die. Because, you know, we're still men. But it's what precedes that. What do you guys think about any of that? I gave you a menu. I'm just curious. He tells him I love you in the bathroom, technically. And it is walkie-talkie, but it'd be equivalent of a dude on the phone with somebody in the bathroom. And you just hear him go, I love you. And you're like, okay. That's weird. Or is it not? I'm curious, actually. And then you have McLean worrying about never apologizing to his wife as well. Which one do you guys want to work with? Because I can do either one.
The I love you.
Cool. All right. What is that? Because McLean, again, he's breaking down, and Al takes a second and he goes, I love you. All the guys out here, they love you. Now, he can't mean it like that. Do you know what I mean? They don't really know each other. All the guys definitely don't know McLean, right? So, what do you think he really means? What is he trying to say? We love you.
We're support you.
We're with you.
We're rooting for you.
Yeah, we're all behind you. We're not there, but what is he telling him? This is important. If they're all with him, if they're all supporting him, they're saying you're not what? Right? Right? That's interesting. 90% of the movie. He's jumping off a building. He's doing it all himself for the most part, right? But really interesting thing. 10% of the time, you know. Would you argue he needs Al in that moment? He needs him to tell him this stuff? I think you pretty well could, right? Now, we started to define this, and I'm going to spell out our menu a little bit. We had like moral support, we had emotional support. For a second, I want to see if there's anything more we could add. I'm just curious. Who is Al to McLean? How would you describe him? I didn't think this would be tough.
I mean, they're really strangers. They don't really know each other at all.
Maybe.
Until, you know.
But you're pushing back against what other idea? What else could they be? Friends. But why? So let's entertain this, because we'd have to prove something like this, right? Why do you immediately push back on that? You have a good reason.
Well, they've never met in person.
They've never met.
They don't really know jack and shit about each other.
Al doesn't learn McLean's real name for a while. He calls him Roy, right? Wait, am I making that up? It's Roy?
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
But it also comes back to, like, when the chief of police or whatever comes out there and he's talking to Al and he's like, you don't even know this guy. Al tries to back McLean up and be like, well, he said this is who he is. Like, he starts to believe him and, like, trust him that he's somebody he can trust instead of...
That's true. That's true. So look, let's establish this. It's a little bit more complicated than their buddies. So we'd have to figure this out. But they're not strangers either, right? It's some kind of in between, and for sure as the movie goes, they grow closer. So much so they hug when they do get out. They're for sure, by the end of the movie, they're friends. And they meet And this is going to be weird language, and I apologize, but they like consecrate their friendship. I don't know if you're familiar with that phrase with like marriage and shit, but like they establish physical contact. You're like, oh man, you're a fucking Al dude. Yeah, you know, they're buddies. And you could argue, have kind of wanted to hug this whole time, and they couldn't, right? But in the same way you become closer with a person, they become closer over time through shared experience. The difference is that experience is all virtual, right? It's all, for 1988, modern technology, you know, ish. Walkie-talkies weren't super modern, by the way, but you get it. So what we have to consider, and I am going to consider getting a different marker. Marker number 2. Let's try this. We're going to define this more, but something we can't forget about. There's a whole tech angle to this that's complicating it. Tech and distance, right? That's your pushback, and it's valid. It's valid pushback. They have never met, and that's an idea we're maybe more used to now in 2022. I know a guy who thinks we're really good friends. I met him on Xbox Live. Notice how I phrase that. But he thinks we're really good friends, right? We've never met. But 2022, that's not so strange, you know? 1988, that's a little weird. That's a little weird, right? So that's what we're thinking about. But in the bathroom scene, he's telling him, we're with you. He's telling him that you're not alone. So however you ended up phrasing it, he needs to rely on other people in this moment. In this moment, which is interesting too. So maybe most of the time he's self-reliant. Maybe most of the time he can do it on his own. But there's some times where he can't. Yeah? And in those moments you need a buddy. Another guy. Is it important? I'm asking. Is it important that it's Al? Another cop, a dude who, I don't want to lead you too much, but like, does it matter that this is another guy who's also a cop who like might understand McClane a little bit? Does it help at all, do you think, in their interactions?
Yeah.
I think it does.
They can relate.
They can. Well, and you pointed out the moment at some point when Al says, again, I'm not going to get it verbatim, but he says, I can tell things he said. He's a badge. Like he uses that language, like really cool cop language, maybe from the 80s. He's a badge. But yeah, it's something about they're able to talk to each other maybe with a kind of shorthand or something. They're able to relate very quickly. I think we'd all agree on that. Yeah.
I mean, even Al at the beginning was like, how can I trust that you are who you are?
Yeah.
And then, they gradually
Yeah.
gain that trust.
How do they do that? I want to spend a minute on this. Do you guys remember, for instance, it's also in the bathroom scene. It's how the bathroom scene starts. Do you remember how the bathroom scene starts? McClane is eating something. It's an old Twinkie.
I think that's right before the bathroom scene.
Is it?
Yeah, because he like
Certainly possible.
He makes a noise on the radio.
Yeah, that's right. He goes, whoa! And Al goes,
Oh my God, what's wrong? He's like, I've been to a 20,000-year-old.
You're right. But it's before that. Yeah. So, but that's what I was trying to look for. Like, do you remember that? That leads them into a different. They don't talk about Twinkies the whole time. This would be a different movie. Do you remember what they end up talking about? Yes. You got kids, cowboy? He says, because they're men. And he does have kids, and he's like, we're working on our first. And he says something about a ranch, because it's like, Jesus Christ, just get past it already. But yeah, they connect via fatherhood. Al's gonna be a dad, McClane is a dad, and like, they share in that, So what do we do with any of this? I still maybe want to talk about this, but we went off on a roll here. This is paragraph number 1. Is this marker 9 too? Oh, I picked up the bad one, didn't I? This is paragraph number 2. And we have more to say about it, but we're leading to potentially paragraph number 3, which may or may not be something about how we define male friendship in the movie. One thing we got to do before we do that, how do we square these two ideas? That McClane is incredibly self-reliant, because he is, but there are times when he's not. Shouldn't that, according to, admittedly, this might be a little bit unfair, the one quotation we pull from this article, shouldn't that kind of fly in the face of the kind of masculinity we're talking about? You know? How is it allowed? I guess is what I'm asking. Is it allowed? Or
Are you asking, is it like being like relied on others? Is that allowed?
yeah, does it somehow risk McClane losing his man card, right? But I'll damn near cry to Al, like real close, you know?
Well, they're kind of manly tears because he was going through, well, when you have glass in your feet and you just got shot by terrorists, you think you kind of earned, like, I'm going to go ahead and have
He earns a pass.
Yeah, it's not like he just walked over yellow and he's crying.
All right, so hold on. I want to write that down because look, what you just leapt into, and I like this very much, and I have nowhere to put it. Hang on. I think we're going to have less and less to say about businessmen due to time, so I'm just going to bracket that off. One possible idea, and I like this very much because it's pretty cynical, is this idea that he's still very self-reliant and no one is questioning that. And God damn it, give him a pass here. Glass out of his feet, people shooting at him. He's thinking about his wife who needs him because he's a man. Yeah, maybe, but I'm gonna. Maybe we could argue that the film is arguing that there are exceptions to every rule. I'm sure you've heard this phrase. And the exception in this case, we would argue, to the rules of masculinity in the film is you're allowed to almost cry. You could argue it's important he does not cry, but almost cry, you even said manly tears, given the circumstances. But if you're gonna do that, if you're gonna bellyache, right, you better be pulling glass out of your feet. You better have just been shot at. You know, stakes are pretty high for this exception. Maybe. You got a lot of evidence there to say, yeah. And one way to test that argument, and we just have to do this for a second, are there any other moments, because I can't quite think of any necessarily, where McClane is not self-reliant? Like there's a moment with Argyle where Argyle says, I'll help you out if you need it, right? When he's going into the building. So that's kind of...
But he could have just been thanking him for his suggestion.
He does. And we don't know how it would have gone.
He could have only been like, no, I'm good. I got rejected, but I'm going to do my thing anyways.
Yeah. They may never see each other again. Yeah, what's up?
Did Argyle grab him a beat kind of a thing because he was uncomfortable with that?
Well, he's driving him around, but he sits up front, so he's like, you could argue less reliant on Argyle. He's more like a passenger than a... What do you call a person who sits in the back of the limousine? A customer? Client? Okay, yeah, So yeah, but you could argue McClane tries to fight against that. Like that, according to this article, is what makes McClane so uncomfortable, is that he would have to rely. Like, it's weird to think about, but the further back you sit in a car, the more reliant you are on the person driving, because you can't see shit, you know? As a passenger, you could at least go, oh, no! You know, like you could. Yeah. What about the end of the movie? Al, again. When the Viking comes back from the dead with the giant gun that they left him because he would want it that way. I think we said last time. Al smokes that guy, right? Without that, they would be dead, probably. What do we do with that scene? We'd have to think about it. Like at first blush, I think McClane is relying on Al here. He doesn't mean to. It just kind of happens that way. It's like, oh, anybody got a gun type of situation, right?
And that scene was more focused on Al and his motive.
For sure, for sure.
John's got a natural in that scene.
Yeah.
Like, oh, and Al.
Al's the main character in that scene.
He's finally got to respect,
Yeah.
that kid that he shot.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, but I would argue that that really just couldn't be anybody though. Like it just so happened to be Al.
Well,
It's just really just whoever drew their gun.
it's whoever has a gun.
Yeah.
And McClane does not.
I just feel like it just so happened to be Al. Like it really,
But also, I feel like it goes to show, like, John, like, just showed so much bravery and stuff like that, and then now Al is
Yeah.
like, overcoming a bunch of stuff, just like John.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's almost like John gave him the confidence to, like, it's almost like he made Al, like, hey, Al, look what I did. Now you can do it.
like inspired a little bit.
Well, there's more. I mean, that could be part of it for sure. But I would also contend that because Al shares his own story, you brought up shooting the kid with the ray gun, he gets emotionally available, and you hear it in Al's voice. I don't remember if he gives the kid's age, 13 to 12-year-old kid, something like that. A kid. He shoots a kid. It's like, God damn, man, the movie's a bummer. But my point is, oh, do you have your hand up? Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was gonna say, more on the limo thing.
Okay.
In the movie.
Okay.
He gets back in the limo, in the back of the limo.
They do.
And he's relying on the driver to
Well, all right. So,
kind of like show him the
pardon the pun. We're going down a road here. We make a couple stops first. But yes. We have so many pieces out in front of us. Let's start with Al, and we'll get back to that. In that scene, also, does anybody? And it's real quick. Did anybody notice what McClane does when Kyle pulls out his mega gun?
He like grabs Holly.
He shields her.
Yeah, he goes down.
He does the man shit. Yes. That's what he does. What else could he do? Do you know what I mean? Could he do anything more than that? No.
Yeah, try to find a weapon.
But there's no, right? Like, so here again, what I'm wondering is this another exception, or at the very least, is it the kind of situation where he does what he's supposed to according to the rules in the movie? You know, he's relying on himself as a fucking meat shield to absorb bullets for his wife, right? You know,
Someone man long left.
yeah, sacrifice.
That's what I'm saying. He was down for like he was like.
Yeah. So I'm just, because if we're gonna say this, we gotta kind of plug up holes, right? So maybe that other scene is, and that does bring me to maybe what we'll talk about for the third paragraph, because I just want to talk about Al. I never get to talk about it. But prior to that, the hole we would plug up is both of these scenes. You could talk about McClane depends on himself in the final scene, right, to shield Holly, and man rules give him a pass in the second paragraph. That's anybody. I'd be crying like a bitch, honestly. Pulling glass out of my feet? Are you kidding me? And people are shooting at me? Come on. So, okay. Can anybody think really quickly? I'm just curious. A different argument we could make about needing support. We're arguing, to rely on Al here. Might we be doing something else to those man rules? I got an eyelash problem. Sorry. Might we be, for instance, trying to modify them in any way here in 1988?
Re-ask the question.
So one road we could go down, and it seems like we're going to go down it because we got some real momentum, so that's cool. One road we could go down, they would both start here, paragraph 1. Paragraph 2, it seems like on the surface, he's violating those rules. However, given the circumstances, it's an exception. You give him a pass. Okay. I'm saying there could be different arguments here. One particular one has something to do with, well, maybe the movie sets up these rules at the start, and it does, but about halfway through the film, which is where the bathroom scene occurs, it's modifying those somewhat. It's saying the rules are maybe changing here in the late 80s in some way. And I'm just curious what you guys think about that.
I don't know if it's the same thing, but I feel like when it comes to like the bathroom scene,
Mhm.
it's more than just like him pulling it out, like glad I just put him get shot at. Like at least when I watched it, I feel like it was more like you're faced with death.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
you're gonna be way more vulnerable, and I feel like that's what's changing. Like you're okay to be vulnerable when you're facing death because like no one technically wants to die.
Yeah.
So it's like that's how I'm moving it. Like that's how they're changing it.
Well, I mean, just to hear you say that, that still sounds like more like this, which is to be faced with that extreme thing, you would give him a pass, right? Maybe. Context is important, and that's some serious context there in the bathroom.
That's why I feel like it's like the bathroom scene is like an exception, just because like he was like dead set, like you could just tell by how he said when he was dead set, like he full blown thought he was about to die. Like, that was it.
Yeah.
Like he kind of lost all
Okay.
his hope.
One thing we could add with that then, one idea, and it's a similar, if not the same argument, but there's a bit of an addendum, which is, you guys keep saying when faced with death. We'd still have to find a way to talk about why that matters. And what I mean is, I think we could all take it for granted. You both said different ways of saying like, he's faced with death here, and we're all like, yeah, that makes sense. Yes, but you'd still have to figure out to explain why it's a big deal. You see what I'm saying? What I would offer, when faced with death, to borrow your language, maybe we could argue McClane realizes what's important as opposed to what's not. The question would be, what's the not here in this scene, considering what we've been talking about? What is important? Family, you know, because that's what he's talking about. But what's not important?
His values that he seeks to hold on to.
These.
Survival.
Right?
Self-reliant values.
Yeah. All that shit about being a big man that he's doing in the first half hour. Dude, I'm probably gonna die. Fuck that, man. Tell my wife I'm sorry. You know, like, we can make that argument. When faced with death, I wish I could come to a different phrase, but that's pretty good when you guys have, is maybe we're arguing he recognizes what's important, what's not, what's maybe more of an act, we could say, you know? So he's like more really himself here. When you say someone's vulnerable, aren't you just saying they lower their defenses? Like, so all that suggests that paragraph 1 is more of an act that he puts on 90% of the time, you know? Okay. Oh yeah, I tabled your thing about the limousine. We should talk about that. What time is it, by the way? I have no clock. 36? Okay, cool. Let's talk about the limo. Maybe that'll be our next. Oh, damn. All right. This is going off the rails a little bit. This is one, paragraph 3, and a different one could be over here. Someone remind me to recap all the branches at some point. Let's talk about the limo. If we go this side, we are hardcore thinking about self-reliance and its importance when it comes to masculinity. And we kind of talked about it all semester, but maybe not in these concrete terms. I think that's still an idea we have now, right? Like, how often do you see a guy walking with something like, you need help? And he's like, no, I'd rather die, right? Like, type of, you know. Or if your dad called you and he needed emotional support, could you even, I don't know what I would do. I don't know what I would do. My dad opened up to me one time about a thing, but I was just like, I'm not ready for this.
My
I mean-
sister did the same thing. I have no idea how to react.
I'm in my 30s. I'm not ready for this. Somehow. Yeah. So it's still there. But in this case, we got to keep testing our theory. What do we do with the limousine scenes in particular? One, I think we could pretty easily argue McClane does his best to get around having to rely on Argyle, right? He sits up front, thus mitigating the distance that would come with being a client, right? The loss of control like you would have in an airplane, okay? But the last scene, that's interesting. It's a lovely scene. Riding off in that busted limousine. Argyle has a line about, if this is how you guys celebrate Christmas, I got to stick around for New Year's or something. He says something like that when they ride off, right? It's kind of ha ha ha. And I think they kiss in the window. We're making that up? Okay. But they're in the back. All the way in the back. And Argyle's all the way up front. So now, according to how we've talked about it thus far, it does seem like Argyle is fully in control, right? He gives it over to him. What about that? Take it easy, Julie. What do you guys think about that? Is he? Let's start with a general question. After we pass around the yawn. It is contagious. People don't know why. There's theories, but they don't know why. Is he relying on Argyle here? Is he giving up control?
Not really.
I don't. You seem pretty sure. Why do you say that?
I think he's more just knows. He's like, I'm gonna make out Molly. I'm going back here for privacy. I'm not going back here for life.
I fully appreciate how maybe legitimate that argument is.
He knows he wants to do something.
But-
He can't do everything. He's gonna do.
What do you? I'm a little bit worried about where this conversation is headed. Let's talk about that. It sounds like you're saying this is another exception, right? Maybe. If so, why? We have to put language to it. What's the exception here to these masculine rules?
Because I've got a lady, basically.
Well, I mean, we don't know. I mean, Argyle's on the clock. You
Not in the
know?
current situation.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it was just like, he's just like, I mean, if I just got shot at and it just went through everything, I wouldn't even care anymore. I'd just be like, yo, I just want to go sit back in the limo and chill. I just want to be by myself for a little bit. Because I don't know. I don't feel like it really had any, like, it obviously has like a little bit to do with Holly, but I feel like it's not.
I was combining both your ideas.
I got you.
Sexcation. You're saying he needs a rest. You're saying he needs other things. Well, it's funny. We have those words, right? At the beginning of the movie, Argyle says, if you score. We've talked about what that means. He's not talking about basketball, right? And now he's in the back of the limo and they're kissing, which traditionally it can be a precursor to other things. Combining that with, you are right, he's been through hell. He certainly looks the part. Holly hasn't had the best day either, and they've earned, we're arguing, some time to give up that control. But this is important. We are not arguing here that he's not giving up self-reliance. He is doing that. But one suggestion would be that it's allowed. And again, the question would be why? I'll tell you guys the last day of class why I'm saying this. It's for ass. It's for ass. What does that tell us about the masculine rule set we're describing in this movie? You got to be self-reliant all the time. Unless, what? Because we've outlined some exceptions.
You are faced with death or about to get
Or ass. So here's what we're saying. The first part of the thesis in this paper is pretty easy. You know, I wonder, I'll bring the camera with me. This will be fun. All right. Something like Words matter. Sorry. Okay. I might throw this chair off the bridge. That'll work. Although masculinity is defined almost entirely via self-reliance. This first half of our thesis. It's an argument, but it's also an argument you wouldn't want to spend an entire paper on, right? If I said, how do you know a guy is a man, capital M? It's like, well, because he can depend on himself. We all get it, okay? First half. So although that's true, we're saying this is more true. Die Hard proves that sexual opportunity and existential threats trump that requirement. That's a fancy way of saying that these two things are more important when it comes to defining whether or not you're a man than that thing. That's an argument. Because if I'm going to ask you guys, do you think that's true? These things are more important to whether or not you have your man card than self-reliance? You're not sure, right? I mean, maybe, but you would take convincing. That's my point. That's a real argument. Someone's having a really good time out here. That's outstanding. Let's see what else we can do. What time is it now? Oh, God. Woo! All right. We have a half hour of fun left. All right. We should consider if there's any other arguments. You guys did great with the facing death thing, so I want to come back real quick. Limousine. One idea that I say I kind of ran with. I'm not going to apologize for that. It's an exception because it's a sexcation, and he's earned it. He's earned it. Okay. Is there anything else? Is there any other way we might talk about the limo, the giving up of control, the giving up of self-reliance here? Because I do think it is that. Does it matter, for instance, that he gives it to Argyle? Does it matter, for instance, that he's with his wife when he does this? Other than the sexcation stuff. Yeah.
His wife, ordered the limo to the airport.
It was Takagi. Takagi ordered it. It's a real quick moment they have. But when he gets to the party and he meets him, he says, are you the one I have to thank for the limousine, or whatever he says? Takagi did it as like a gesture. Takagi seems like a really nice guy. That's super dead. Yeah. But no, that's what it is. But it is for sure, returning to a conversation I guess we're not going to have now, representative of this world, right, that Holly is from. The limousine, I mean, it comes from her company, right? It's going to her company. It's now leaving her company to go home, which is interesting. Like to their family, like their legit home. Does it matter that he gives up control to Argyle in this moment? We said before, if this had occurred at the beginning of the movie, he's a client, right? Do you read it that way in this last scene, that he's just a client? I think so.
So it's
But that would be maybe a different paper. But yeah. So how might we talk about that here? You know? Who is Argyle to McLean, or who is McLean to Argyle? You think?
I don't know if it's like too far-fetched, but I think like when it comes down to it, it's like an alpha thing. Like we know Argyle is young, so
Yeah.
I feel like it's like levels to masculinity and the standards or expectations, and Argyle hasn't reached the peak of masculinity that John has basically completed. Like,
So I hate that we're doing this. McLean's like the master and Argyle's like the student.
yeah, that's not a client, but it's like more of a master.
I mean, yeah.
Like he's still young, so he's still like going, like he still has ways to go.
Well, and he has his moment
Yeah.
where he wrecks the ambulance, and then the hacker, the only henchman he could have done this to, right? He hits him one time, and he goes, "Ooh." You know, like
He has his one moment, but John has countless moments.
yeah. But on the spectrum, he's at the start of his journey up the masculine mountain or whatever. Yeah. Well, but see, that makes it all the more. So let's try this on. That makes it all the more interesting then, if we're going to argue he gives that guy control, right? That's what you have when you have the wheel. So what do we do with that? You know, I mean, because maybe it's a different kind of exception. That's possible. But like, what does it mean if he is like the masculine master in this movie? I hate that phrase. It sounds like the last thing you would hear in a dungeon, like with a mask. Anyway, if you don't understand that, don't worry about it. He gives his protege, maybe a better word, because Al's not that. Al is his equal at the end. I mean, they don't have the same resume. Al does smoke that Viking guy like that. Al's good. But Argyle punches a guy, and it's important, but it hurts, and like, you know.
Well, I don't even really know he did that.
Yeah, but we do.
Yeah.
We do.
But from his point of view, it's
No, I know, but like we're allowed to take the film as a whole. What we're not doing, to be clear, is being super worried about characters' motivations. I mean, sometimes for context it matters, but like we're trying to look at the film as a document, as a complete thing, right? So we know, and I think we could ably argue, weirdly, Argyle is like his protege anyway. He's been following him the whole time on the radio. That's like kind of studying, you know? I don't know. Would it be common in any era for like a protege to drive the master around, I guess? I mean, that doesn't feel too like wrong. Is it? I'm kicking stuff around at this point. I'm really curious what you guys think. Is it a kind of service in a way? If that's how we're describing it, you know? But I mean, I still don't think he's a client, because that term has like a lot of distance to it. But I don't know. I mean, I suppose in some way you're saying this still works as another exception, right? He's for some reason he's allowed to give Argyle control because he's the alpha or whatever. I hate that word, but yeah.
I mean, even the person like Limbo is still technically more power. It's just that Blaine viewpoint on it changed. He was like, oh, I want to be in control and be fun. But he's like, I'm still in control, but still the important person. It doesn't drive me.
Okay, so a different exception. There's two ways that could go, by the way, but we could part of it we could combine with our earlier thing. McLean, I'm out of room, so is the alpha god. But as a result of that, you're saying he's clearly worried at the beginning of the movie. Clearly. Here he's not. Doesn't bother him. Everything he just did, what's he got to worry about? Yeah. We could also say, there was another way that could go, and now I'm trying to remember it. We could also say he's not worried about it if we go on this like evolving masculinity tip, like something about as he's changed over the course of the movie, he's realized that you don't have to be reliant or self-reliant all the time. I mean, just before this, he does rely on Holly as well, right? In the scene when he yells her name and they work together real quick. You could make some kind of an argument like he's learned sometimes you have to depend on others, and also maybe having those experiences have taught him that this whole self-reliant thing isn't like the end-all be-all. It isn't the most important thing, you know? What's fun to me about that, and I'm sorry I'm not going to take the camera with me, is how weirdly similar that is to this one. This one's way more cynical, which is why I like it. Not very cynical. But it seems again and again we're coming back to this idea that the movie takes self-reliance at the start, which would be pretty important for a hero. You kind of have to, like, you're screwed otherwise. But over the course of the movie, it seems to chip away at it. It seems to suggest it's not the most important thing. You can have help. You need help sometimes. I think it's not an accident either that McClane is one of the first action heroes that's like an everyman, that's like a person. Do you know what I mean?
And he did have to get the helmet back before he allowed
Yeah.
himself to have help.
Well, but and the heroes we talked about last time, the gods, I would use that term, don't need help because they're basically immortal. This guy's not. We need help sometimes. He needs help sometimes. Yeah, for sure. Okay. That is one direction this paper could head. And you'll notice, by the way, we did all of this with one quotation, I think, from the bib. God help us. I don't think we have time to talk about any more quotations. It's almost 12 now, isn't it? So yeah, I'm going to tell you this. The other quotations in the bib are great. There's a lot of stuff here. We also haven't involved any other secondary sources. So yeah, a lot to be done. But you'll notice, by the way, I have pushed this, I have structured this, but all the scenes you guys pulled up, all the ideas, this is your stuff, okay? And I know I say this all the time, but that's because students don't believe me. If you're detailed and you think about like what a guy says or what happens, and hey, it probably matters at the very end of the movie that he sits in the back of the limo. Like, these details matter. When you dig into those, the paper kind of starts writing itself, right? Like, I honestly was struggling to keep up, like, in an orderly fashion. And I say that's one paper. Technically, it's two, which is I only wrote one thesis down. Let's try one more. To recap, we are now, well, either one of these papers would start with self-reliance, first paragraph, because it does seem pretty central to the movie, okay? Second paragraph still could talk about needing support from Al, and you could potentially say it's still an exception because the man rules, okay. But now, what I want to try to talk about with the last little bit of time we have, totally different paper. Now we're thinking about buddyhood. Two guys who were pals, and how that gets defined in the movie. So there's different ways this could go, but mostly we got to think about Al a little bit more. The two scenes that stand out most to me, other than the ones we've talked about, we have our introduction to Al, which is in the convenience store, which is not a good look for him initially, right? And we have the final scene in the movie where Al blows Carl away, right? Those are two very different people. Like, and even in, and again, I don't know if you remember, but the way the last scene is shot, you see the gun first. You hear it because Carl does one of those 80s, whoa. And then you see the gun and it pans up. and you see Al's face and the music swells and you're like, oh shit. Like it's a big moment. I'm curious about that. Somebody said earlier on that side of the room that like it's like Al getting his mojo back, which it is. But of course, we can't talk about it like that in a paper. We got to define what that mojo is, right? Because we'd also be arguing what he's lost it. That's what he lost when he accidentally shot the kid. What is it though, do you think? He says he cannot draw his gun, right?
Should we use as a metaphor for other manly things? Can't do anymore.
There's for sure, and you can find articles on this. We're not making this up. I'm not just being weird. There's a whole argument about impotence when it comes to not being able to draw your gun, because guns are kind of phallic.
Kind of like Wolverine where he couldn't draw his claw.
There's that. Well, and for forever, like for centuries before we really had guns, you could do the same thing with swords. If a guy like won't duel, it's like, bro, you afraid to pull out your sword? Pull out your sword. Show it to us. Which I will admit is weird. But there's that. There's that. And I mean, coupled with the fact, and I mentioned this to you guys the other day, the clerk in that first scene basically calls him pregnant, right? Who are you buying these honey ones for? They're for my wife. She's pregnant. And the clerk is like, yeah. Yeah. As if to say, you don't have a wife, you're pregnant.
Bunch of guys like donuts.
Yeah. Well, he's emasculating him to his face, which is also terribly emasculating. It'd be one thing if he said it after he left, but he does it to his face. And Al can't say anything. Why, do you think? Let's start there. Why can't he tell that clerk to fuck off or anything? Why do you think he can't do that?
Because I don't think Al was anything like I don't think we can just be like.
You feel all right? This is a fun thought exercise. So you think in that moment McClane would have had something to say?
Yeah, I feel like honestly, like you could consider Al a businessman. Like, he's not really.
Oh yeah, according to the paradigm we never got to talk about.
Yeah, I'll say he's not technically like a businessman, but like he kind of has all the same personality traits and does some similar stuff. And because I feel like if McCain got insulted like that,
Yeah, well,
he'd fire back.
I also don't know if McClane would be buying a bunch of honey buns.
Yeah, but I mean, just if he was in a similar scenario.
Yeah. What'd you say also? Sorry.
Well, it's like Al never quits throughout the entire movie.
Yeah. Well, and that's McClane's defense mechanism. That's how he would cut against the clerk, but it's also how the movie always reminds us that's like a weapon of his, which again, of course, Al can't draw. Al's too nice, right? He's too nice. You know what? One of the nicest things you can do is not shoot anybody. Isn't that like the nicest thing you could do?
Especially when you're kind of.
Shoot anybody. A Girl Scout. How many people did you shoot today, Laura? Nobody. High five. That's just a nice thing to do. He's just nice. Doesn't the movie here in the late 80s kind of suggest to be nice is to be less masculine? At least at the start. I would have questions about that. But think about all the dudes we meet. Even guys who work together, like all the henchmen, they're kind of assholes to each other in that way that I think guys still are. The term we have is like talking shit, you know? But they're all kind of aggressive. The clerk is weirdly aggressive with this cop he's never met before, right? I almost wonder if this would be a totally different paper. The first body paragraph would be, although a super important characteristic concerning masculinity in the film is aggression. And it's not aggression in the way we usually think about it. It's subtle, and it's throughout all the dialogue, right? You could go back and watch the first half of the movie. 25% of everything every male character says is like mildly insulting or challenging. But what's interesting, again, Al stays nice. And it kind of matters. McClane needs him. If Al was less nice, does he tell McClane he loves him? That everybody loves him? I don't know, man. I can't see that, to borrow your example, I can't see that coming from a more McClane type character, right? If McClane was on the other end of the walkie-talkie talking to McClane, you know? I can't see that happening. But something about Al... What time is it? Okay. Some of you have packed up. You're messing with me. Let's try this on. I'm going to try to speed this along a little bit because we don't have time. Would you say that Al is defenseless? Because here's what I'm wondering. If he can't draw his gun until the end, okay, and guys like this clerk can just give him shit, right? And he can't, like McClane would maybe be able to, he can't retort. He just goes, what's his big thing? He says, bag it at the end of the scene, talking about his honey buns. Put him in a bag. I'm the big man with my bag of honey buns. Is it out of bounds to say he's defenseless, you think?
Maybe not. Because he does seem to brush off the comments. He doesn't seem like he's bothered by it. He goes out kind of like nothing in a way.
I don't know if he's bothered or not. I mean,
He's not visibly bothered.
no.
He even says like bag it. Like,
Well, I will say actually his tone changes when he says bag it, right? Like he's a little, I don't think he's happy.
annoyed.
Yeah. But I think he's bothered. But again, my point would be whether or not he's bothered, which I think he might just a little bit. He can't say anything. He can't do anything. He doesn't have it in him. Like that seems to be what we keep coming back to. He doesn't have it in him. And I think the gun would be a nice metaphor for that as well. In all the ways we talk about masculinity, self-reliance would be one, but wouldn't self-defense be another, right? And how do you defend yourself in this movie? Well, you get a gun, and or conversationally, you wield your words as a weapon, right? In all the ways that McClane does. And Al can't do that. So in that paper, our first paragraph actually might just be, just pick any of the dialogue from the beginning. Maybe the scene that we, again, haven't talked about on the plane with the businessman. Businessman is just trying to help him out, right? Businessman realizes he's defenseless, and you know that how? How do you know the businessman goes, I'm defenseless?
I don't know why.
The look on his face when he faces death. Right? For just a minute, he's like, what the fuck? Like he's like, I'm a little man who can't do it, right? He's in this moment. So the movie suggests that the ability to defend yourself is important when it comes to being a man. First paragraph. Second paragraph, when we meet Al, I think you could double down on that. Look at Al. We don't know who he is first time you see him in the movie. You're like, why are we looking at this cop? Oh, he's going to go bumble about, which he does, bumble about the building. This is supposed to be McClane's help. What's that? A guy who walks in and goes, this all looks fine. I got $50 on these assholes, the guy says. And he's like, that's fine. Cool. I'm out of here. And McClane has to attack him, basically, with a dead body. Right? What's interesting, and I know we're almost out of time. That's 2 paragraphs. Third paragraph is something about, at a certain point, that comes in handy. McClane needs Al due to how nice Al is, how defenseless. And again, the synonym we used earlier, vulnerable. How vulnerable Al can be. Because again, I don't know if McClane gets vulnerable with anybody else. I think it helps a lot that Al has been vulnerable with him, with the ray gun story, and like tells him, hey man, my defenses are down. You don't know this about me. They've been down this whole movie though. So anyway, you got anything, you just get it off your chest, man. You just let me know, no judgment. So McClane is safe with Al because he can't attack him, right? Wouldn't that maybe be part of the argument? McClane's not worried about Al coming back with some man shit, right? And then what do we do with the last scene? and after this, I'll let you go. Al's been nice through the whole movie.
Like, I guess being a man, like every time comes out of a man, it's his mojo back. Like you said.
Well, but so now he can get a weapon. Now he can defend himself, and he can defend rather others. Might that matter? That, not even to be super technical, he's not drawing a gun to attack somebody. He's drawing a gun to defend somebody. That's different, right? Why does that matter? That difference, do you think? Because like the henchmen, they attack all kinds of people. They're assholes, right? But I don't think anyone would really accuse them of like not being masculine. Carl, for instance, pretty.
Because it was either like he drew that gun and saved his friend.
Yeah.
Carl shot him, his friend, him, and Ollie just started spraying.
So would you say then, and we're just trying this on, and again, I know we're almost out of time, guys, but is it a logical extension of his behavior? What I mean is, in the movie it gets treated like, oh, he finally did it, you guys say he got his mojo back. That suggests a change in him, which maybe, but I almost wonder if we could argue, well, given his behavior through the rest of the movie, if you consider the fact that it's a defense, it's not an attack, right? Couldn't you argue? Because again, it's not even really he's defending himself. I mean, maybe Carl would eventually get to him in the spray that would ensue. But you know who he's going after first. He wants McClane. Like he's going after them. So it's like Al is able to draw when it's not for himself, when it's for somebody else, right? All I'm getting at, and we have no time, and I think you guys have mostly checked out. I appreciate you sticking around. Is I think here at the end with Al, there's way more going on in terms of almost like a new kind of masculinity. Al throughout the movie is emasculated. And a super simple argument would be, well, he's a man at the end because he shoots somebody. But I think that ignores important details, right? The whole defending somebody else, doing it for somebody else, I think that matters. So anyway, I'll leave you with that. Does anybody know what's due next time? I should have written it down. I didn't.
Body paragraphs, I think.
2 body paragraphs? That feels right. You know what? We'll all find out together when we go look. I'm pretty sure we have something due though, so make that happen. Last thing I want to say, and I'll let you go. These are all just possibilities. Depending upon what you think about the movie, depending upon what scenes you're interested in, what details from those scenes you're interested in, what sources you have found or what sources you will continue to find, right? Last thing I want to point out to you. You gotta be very careful how I say this. You can use other sources other people have found. What you should not do is like try to plagiarize people with bibs that we bring in. Don't do that, because I'll know. But for instance, a lot of you got some real kind of juice going with how we talked about this article. It's a good article, by the way. We only talked about one quotation. Maybe you like that quotation. Go find the article, use that quotation. Or use some of the other ones that we didn't talk about, which are also good. Any of this is fair game, right? And with that, I'll see you next week. Thank you.